episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Well, welcome everybody again to another episode of our show. We're bringing you another fascinating guest today who is involved in creating a better tomorrow for all of us. Today we have the opportunity to be joined by Dr. Björn Örvar, who is Chief Science Officer, Executive Vice President of Business Development, and a co-founder of ORF Genetics, which is an innovative plant biotechnology company and a pioneer in developing and manufacturing high-quality recombinant proteins such as growth factors derived from barley plants. ORF Genetics was established back in 2001, initially to develop innovative, economically viable, and enabling solutions to produce recombinant proteins using barley grain as their vehicle for production, providing an efficient and safe method compared to other protein expression systems. Dr. Örvar served as the CEO of the company from 2006 to 2013, as the Executive V.P. and Chief Scientific Officer since 2013, and was a member of the board from 2001 to 2006. Dr. Örvar received his Ph.D. in plant molecular genetics in 1997 from the University of British Columbia in Canada, was a postdoc fellow at McGill University in Montreal for 3 years, focusing on plant cell stress signaling. And he is currently responsible for a wide range of research and innovation within the company, as well as being the international spokesperson for their new skincare brand known as BIOEFFECT. A lot to talk about today, but Dr. Björn Örvar, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
It's great having you, and as I did mention in the intro, when I talk about our virtual road trip that we take on this show, we are journeying to see you in Iceland today. But that being said, I would love to start off, as we typically do on the show, by passing you the microphone for a little bit, just to talk a little bit more about yourself, everything from where you grew up to when you got interested in plant molecular genetics, the whole area of plant biotech, and a little bit of your early career journey. I think that'd be a great way to start things off.
Yes, so I'm from Iceland, born here, and I have always been fascinated with science. I think I can say that. And but for the first few years after I finished undergraduate, I actually taught in a college, and then I decided to go for a graduate study in University of British Columbia, focusing on plant molecular genetics. However, I did my time in the lab, so to speak, for many years, but I've always been very much interested in how we can actually use science to develop a product. So how can we actually apply science to do something more than just delivering scientific results and so forth? At the same time, I very much respect all the scientists around the world that are doing a fantastic job of showing us some new results, new science, and so forth. But I want to take it further and bring it into a product. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. And for a long history, not just of the healthcare area, but in all industries, plants have had a presence. And, we're thinking back to, obviously, a long history of plant-derived bioproducts in the pharmaceutical industry, obviously in consumer health, in fabrics, in foods, of course. And the area that you're involved in, which I'll broadly term molecular farming, where we're looking at these amazing biofactories that use photosynthesis and carbon dioxide and so forth to make innovative things for us, goes back a little bit. It's somewhat of a new theme, but in the scope of things, people have been looking at plants as a way to make sort of not just the natural stuff, but unnatural or newer things. Talk a little bit, if you would, just introducing us to the history of molecular farming in general as a tool for the biotechnology space to make bioproducts.
Yes, well, I can just give you as an example from my own experience. So sure. Initially, I was very much fascinated with the idea of developing new cultivars that could be, for example, tolerate more stress, cold stress, heat shock, salt tolerance, and so forth. And that was actually my initial idea of going into plant molecular genetics and so on. And I come from Iceland, which is a relatively cold place. Very few plants can grow here in the summer and so forth. So my interest was in using the bioengineering technology to actually improve different cultivars to tolerate more cold and frost and so forth. However, the sentiments towards GMO is not so positive here in Europe. Actually, it's more positive in Iceland. I would say that GMO sentiment here in Iceland is quite similar to probably in US and Canada. But I always saw this as it had to be a global project, whatever I was working on, and just to be very honest about it, I didn't want to work on genetic engineering on plants within Europe. That would always be so political and so forth.
Sure.
But in striking contrast to that, I thought that actually molecular farming, using plants, using the same technology actually to produce some valuable proteins in this case, would actually be much more fun to work with, as it wouldn't be as political and so forth. And that's probably the reason that I actually decided to turn my focus to molecular farming. I believe in general that plants have a great opportunity to produce different kinds of recombinant proteins for different purposes and so on. So I think we're just starting there. We can talk about proteins such as growth factors for stem cell or cultured meat and so forth, but also in terms of taste management, like we have been looking at, and so forth, and improving the quality of food and so forth. So I think there is a vast opportunity there.
And took us a little bit. I don't know much about, except for me eating it occasionally in soup. But talk about barley, if you would, because I know a lot of the sort of the past molecular farming that I've sort of followed, things like tobacco. I remember locally Charlie Arnson from out on the West Coast talking about bananas at one point with the edible vaccines. Why barley? Talk about, are there interesting facts about barley that we should know? And then, of course, is there obviously you're working, we'll get into sort of the greenhouses and everything you're doing in Iceland, but is there a connection with barley in Iceland that we don't know about?
Well, first of all, I've been working with different plants, or genetically engineering different plants, but I was always very fascinated with the barley, using or exploiting the seed. It's a relatively good protein producer. You have the protein machinery within the seed, and if you can exploit that to produce a recombinant protein, that would be actually excellent. And however, barley is extremely difficult plant in genetic engineering and tissue culture. So there are relatively few labs around the world working with barley. So it was actually quite a risk that we took in the early days to focus on the barley plant, to use or develop the barley plant as the vehicle for recombinant protein production. However, today we have up and running high throughput system doing this. It's no problem today, but barley has this quality of, it's a relatively good protein producer, but also barley is what we call biologically contained species. It means that it is very difficult to see. There are rare instances of cross-pollination between different plants in barley. And this is something that we obviously exploit in our greenhouse, but also if we do in-field cultivation, it would be more acceptable by the regulatory body to have a plant that is so biologically contained like the barley plant. And then also, I come from Iceland, and very few, like I said previously, very few plants grow here. Barley almost grows here. I mean, we have a harvest. It's not a very reliable cultivation here in Iceland, but in most years we can have some harvest. And I had to focus on something that could grow here I'm not focusing on wheat or soybean or rice, definitely. Yeah.
Sure. Talk a little bit then, if you would. You mentioned you have several things in the portfolio. One has to do with certain growth factors, where you're looking at them more as a tool for the stem cell research market. You're also very active in related growth factors, cytokines for skincare, and once again, one of the selling points obviously is moving away from animal-like growth factors and towards the plant ones. Talk a little bit about some of what you're working on currently in the portfolio.
Yes, so initially we worked on human growth factors for stem cell research, medical research in general, and we launched our first product line, human growth factors, in 2007. We call isokine growth factors, highly purified growth factors. Then actually being a young biotech company and always faced with the problems of funding and so forth, and we decided to also develop a product that we could easily or more easily bring in, give us some revenues. So we actually identified a few growth factors that we already have had in our isokine product line that we could actually use in terms of skincare, use it in skincare products. Initially, we were just going to sell those growth factors to skincare or cosmetic companies around the world. But we realized that these companies had, in some cases, limited knowledge about growth factors, but definitely very little information or knowledge about how to formulate them into a skincare product. So we decided, and that was also a risk, we decided just to, okay, let's just develop our own product line, which is called BIOEFFECT, and we launched that in 2010. And it's now sold in 27 markets around the world. It's doing quite well, and this has given us some revenues to continue our R&D and looking into new projects and so forth. And the last project, and we are using to some extent revenues from the BIOEFFECT skincare line, to develop a new product line that is called mesokine growth factors. These are animal growth factors specifically designed for the cell cultured meat industry. So this is a way of surviving for a small biotech company, but it turned out to be quite a good business model in our case. And but also I have to say that in terms of our mesokine animal growth factors that we are now developing and scaling up and producing, we also received a large grant from the European Union last year just to speed up this process.
Excellent. As you were mentioning early on that obviously not a lot of things grow very well in Iceland. You are working with greenhouse production, which has come a long way over the years in terms of the amounts per square meter and so forth, the biomass that one can produce. But you're also, interestingly, Iceland is, has a lot of renewable energy sources. You're located on a black lava field, which is also quite intriguing for someone that's not around that type of environment. Talk a little bit about what a black lava field is and sort of the renewable energy opportunities that come from that help you sort of keep energy clean, but at the same time cheaper than other sources that you might have to tap into to run a greenhouse.
Yes. So as we are located in Iceland, you think about greenhouses, and we have a relatively large greenhouse operation in Iceland, and the reason is that we have this access to geothermal energy, which is a renewable energy. It's a low cost energy. So we were always focused on using greenhouses to cultivate our barley plants because of this unique energy source we have here. And so Iceland has this renewable energy, geothermal energy, hydroelectric power, and things like that. And we are located in a very geologically active area We have just 7 kilometers away from our greenhouse is a active volcano. It just stopped erupting a few weeks ago. So it's continuously producing new lava, and so Iceland is all about black lava and geologically active volcanoes and so forth. And the downside, of course, you have those volcanoes. You never know where they show up. And but the upside is that you have access to this fantastic energy, and we use that in our company with our greenhouses and so forth. Yeah.
And also then obviously one of the concerns, and I think you address this though, is with GMOs that you're fairly also isolated out there. So it's not like genes can hop from, out of the greenhouse to some other species. And I think that, which has always been a concern for the groups that have tried to do molecular farming in the past in the middle of a soybean field or whatever. And then genes end up, however, other places they shouldn't be. So I think that's kind of another interesting part of your story. What as a plant molecular geneticist, I'd love to just get your thoughts on some of the other areas that we've seen sort of in the space, and whether they may or may not be of interest for ORF Genetics in the future as you develop further your business model and explore some of these different opportunities. And obviously the one that comes up in a major way are plant-produced vaccines, whether they be edible vaccines like Charlie Arntzen used to talk about, or just using barley or other species as a way to make these different antigens and so forth cheaper, less expensively, and what have you, for the future. Any interest in the vaccine space at ORF Genetics in the future?
No, I don't think so. And the reason is that I think they already have developed a really nice plant systems to produce vaccines. Really elegant systems. Sure. and technology, and they are based more or less on so-called transient expression. Yeah. So these are not transgenic plants and so forth. So I think that's the right approach to take if you're talking about vaccines, especially if there is like a epidemical vaccines and so forth. You should definitely rely on that, not on transgenic plants like what we are doing. So it's a different story if you think about all the biologics and things like that. Then you can consider, and I think you should consider transgenic plants instead of transient expression. But for vaccines, definitely go for the transient expression system, which are really elegant today.
Okay, then on that note, obviously coming to the other end of that spectrum, as you're just mentioning, I look at the list of the top 10, well, maybe even the top 20 drugs in the world nowadays. They're all monoclonal antibodies generating billions and billions of dollars. Monoclonals, other unique biologics, things of this nature. Are they in your business plan and potential for molecular farming there?
Well, not monoclonals, because again, there we also have a very good system producing them, CHO cells and things like that. And they've been like optimizing that system tremendously in the last 20 years or whatever. And I don't think transgenic plants can easily compete with that. Okay. So they have to compete in different areas with more difficult proteins maybe, and something that you also need in large quantities. However, there is always going to be this is always going to be a tough road, because the pharmaceutical industry in general is relatively conservative. The regulatory body around the pharmaceutical production is also relatively conservative and strict and so on. And this system in place, both on the private side and also on the governmental side, is more or less set up and custom made for systems like CHO cells or even bacterial yeast, but definitely not for plants. And so I think there is a long way to go using plants for this, and that has to do a lot to do with the mindset, I think.
Okay. Well, then coming back to one other area that's always fascinated me, and clearly this is right in your own scientific domain. As you were mentioning at the beginning, you worked on frost resistance in your previous research, and clearly Iceland and has a connection there. And I remember years ago seeing some of the incredible numbers just here in the United States alone of what happens with a very short frost in say a state like Florida, and the billions that are lost. Exciting things. Obviously, you probably you watch all these areas. You're focused on ORF and that business, but talk about frost resistance for a couple of minutes and where we are sort of as a scientific community on dealing with this major issue.
Yes, I think unfortunately, because of this anti-GMO sentiment out there, I think many labs have given up on pursuing this road avenue. I think there is a tremendous opportunity there, technically speaking, or for example, improving frost tolerance, and even just improving cold tolerance, because that would, in many cases, that would be enough just to improve the cold tolerance. And the interesting thing is that these stresses that the plant is often faced with can be of different nature, but the reaction of the plant is to some extent very much similar. It doesn't matter if it's a heat shock, cold shock, or a pest that is attacking the plant uses in many cases similar arsenal to fight back. And I think it's very unfortunate that we didn't that we couldn't continue a lot of effort going into this research, because it definitely will help us, or could help us, in terms of feeding the world and so on. I think it's and my kind of personal view is that we definitely need to introduce again genetic engineering of plants to help us with some of those food problems we will be faced with in the coming years and decades. And that has a lot to do with improving stress tolerance, different stress tolerance in plants, because we are always how can I say, we are forced to grow these plants in always worse and worse environment. Climatically speaking, and also in terms of soil and water, access to water and so on. So we have less land, and this land that is available has all worse and worse quality and worse and worse climate. So I think we definitely need to introduce and put a lot of effort into plant genetic engineering to at least help us to solve some of those problems.
I completely agree with that, and I think that triple sort of whammy of frost, of drought, and then of course salinity, and then we did a little show a little while ago about sort of the amount of deserts that are forming, coastal deserts that are forming everywhere on this planet. I'd really like personally to see more of that. But anyway, getting back to you at ORF Genetics, you mentioned the marketed products. You have the mesokine, acekine, and dermakine, working with the research community, working on the derma side. Anything else coming up, 2022, conferences you're going to be speaking at, new product launches, anything that you want to mention on the show, please have the microphone.
Yes, so what we are now, our main focus now, in addition to our BIOEFFECT skincare line that is actually just in an autopilot, so to speak, our main focus now is to really put all our efforts into the mesokine portfolio and mesokine production, and scaling up the production, expanding our portfolio, communicating with all those cell cultured meat companies around the world. And we think that we have a lot of opportunities there. And also we think that we can help this industry a lot by bringing down the cost of those animal growth factors dramatically, and at the same time be able to deliver the volumes that they will definitely need in very few years to come. So I would say like our focus now and emphasis is all on mesokine production and how we can improve this technology and the availability and reduce the cost. So we are very excited for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think you're positioning yourself in the right space, and I've done a couple shows on both cell cultured meat and cell cultured fish, and they definitely, when you look at the scale they're going to be at, I think you're definitely in the right spot for providing those solutions that they will need to get the millions of tons of food to all of us. So I think it's a very exciting time, and you're definitely in the right space with the position that you're going with the plant alternatives. So really exciting work you're doing there, and wishing you the best with the research, the best with the company, moving it all forward. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode on the podcast or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Björn Örvar, Chief Science Officer, Executive Vice President of Business Development, and co-founder of ORF Genetics in Iceland. Björn, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to our audience. Thanks for everything you're doing up there in Iceland. And as we like to say on our show, thank you for helping to create the better tomorrow for all of us. Really fascinating story.
Well, thank you very much. You're welcome.